Hello, my name is Justin Gaeta. I'd like to begin by telling you 3 facts. 2 of them are true and 1 of them is a lie. One of my favorite shows growing up as a child was Captain Planet. I have only 9 fingers, and most of my career I have spent working remotely. Over the course of my presentation, you'll find out which of these is true and which is a lie. The focus of this presentation is to discuss communication issues. I'd like to analyze 3 examples of communication issues: failure to tailor the content to your audience, a lack of communication, and improper nonverbal cues. My first job out of college was working at a high school. On one occasion, I found myself addressing the freshman class, about 120 students whose average age was 10 years younger than I. In trying to make a point about the impact we have on the environment, I used an example of one of my favorite television shows as a child, Captain Planet. After making my point, I looked around the room and noticed blank faces on the audience. The young students did not understand my reference, and the point was completely lost. I had failed to tailor my content for the audience. In order to effectively reach your audience, you should ensure the content being presented will connect with them. Avoid using jargon or technical language that your audience will not understand. This will distance them. Instead, use language and examples to which your audience can relate. The second communication issue I would like to address is the lack of communication. An absence of communication can be very destructive. It often begins with productivity inefficiencies, perhaps an overlap of the same work. If colleagues are not communicating, a next step is to assume things, assuming your colleague understands what you are doing, even if you may not be communicating. Now begins the dangerous slope. Lack of communication breeds distrust. By not communicating what you are doing, one begins to not trust the other person. Finally, colleagues who do not communicate with one another will go directly over the head to a superior. Rather than confronting issues, it seems easier instead to speak to another person. Can you relate to a time where there was an absence of communication between you and another person? Did you find similar effects of this lack of communication? In one of my previous positions, there was an extreme lack of communication between one of my colleagues and I. The job demanded that we both work together on common goals. However, we would each be working remotely, both working together, but from different locations and seeing each other infrequently. Working remotely was something to which I was very accustomed, as most of my career has been spent working remotely. As 2 colleagues working on the same goals from different locations, communication is key. However, from the beginning, communication was a challenge. Our schedules and styles were quite different. We both found it easier to do our own things. This did not end well. Our productivity was inefficient. We found ourselves doing much of the same work the other colleague had already completed, but simply had not communicated. We began to not trust one another, assuming falsities about the other person. Eventually, the situation was in such poor condition that we had to permanently separate from one another. This experience had a profound impact on me. I will never forget the importance of communication and the detrimental effects that come from the absence of communication. The final communication issue I would like to address comes from improper nonverbal cues. Nonverbal cues include all the communication between people that do not have direct verbal translation. For example, what do you imagine is the true meaning of this statement? I have only 9 fingers. The nonverbal cue of my wink indicates that the statement is false. Studies have shown that communication is 7% verbal and 93% nonverbal. This stunning percentage indicates the importance of proper communication tones, facial expressions, and other nonverbal cues. Improper nonverbal cues can result in major communication issues. Take this scenario for example. Imagine you are a boss speaking to a group of subordinates about a serious issue. You notice that one employee is not looking at you, that their hand is on their head, and the person appears to be looking at their cell phone. What is the result of this person's nonverbal cues? Do you think the person is listening to you? Do you think they take this issue seriously? Major communication issues can arise from improper nonverbal cues. We must be aware that our words are important, but our body language, tone, and other nonverbal cues have a tremendous impact on how our message is received. In summary, when communicating with another person or audience, be sure to tailor your content appropriately. Do not underestimate the detrimental effects that come from the absence of communication. And be aware of your nonverbal cues. Thank you very much. Have a great day.